Welcome to Coffee with the Editor here at the Southern African Railway Association's Conference and Exhibition. I'm here with Youssef. He is from the African Rail Company, ARC. Youssef, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, great. First, thanks very much for having me on Coffee with the Editor. I've always been following Railways Africa magazine, and I've enjoyed a lot of the content that you put together. It's very impressive, actually. We get a lot of insight into the industry as a whole, so I just wanted to start by saying that. So thank you for having me. It's a little bit by design that we've not really been out there per se. We've basically been operating this business for the last 10 years. So previously it was another business that we actually bought into when we first came into this part of the world, into Southern Africa. I'm actually originally from Africa, but from the north of Africa in Egypt. But we decided to come down here and look for opportunities, and one of those opportunities was clearly for us rail, although at the time 10 years ago it was probably a different dynamic than it is now, and it's much more exciting for us to see a lot of the what we could see happening in the future starting to bear fruit. So it's a little bit by design that African Rail Company has been kind of under the radar while we were busy building out our understanding of the industry, our understanding of this particular geography as well. So a little bit of a history of African Rail. Over the last 10 years we've been operating predominantly, I would say, sitting between clients and the rail authorities, trying to assist in some of the problems that clients have when dealing with particularly multiple rail authorities at the same time. Where, if you're dealing with a trucking business, it's sort of A to Z, you're dealing with one company. Any demurrage issues, you deal with one company. Whereas, a lot of customers were getting frustrated, and we could see when they would deal with multiple different rail authorities, and they would have to be dealing with demurrage from one to the other, etc. So we started by sitting in the middle of that and dealing with all those problems, almost outsourcing the logistics sort of division of a commodity trading business, for instance. And then we started doing that with diesel. We found that to be very successful. I can go into why we started with diesel in terms of our understanding of the market. And basically, that's mostly what we've been doing for the last decade. And then, in the last 3 years, we decided to branch out into other commodities. So, now we're running copper, coal, lithium, chrome, and containers. And obviously, we're always looking for other commodities. We're just starting molasses as well in Mozambique. Geographically speaking, we've always been focused on East African ports, predominantly Beira and Maputo, Matola, and working between Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia. Recently, we just got our license for Malawi as well. And then obviously the big prize for us, as with everyone in this part of the world, is South Africa. South Africa is, I think, the 7th largest rail network in the world. Obviously, within Africa, it's number one in terms of track capacity, and by and large, it's been what we've been waiting for to open up in a similar way to the rest of the countries I mentioned that are essentially open access, whereas South Africa has been largely Transnet dominated, but we can see now that everything's opening up exactly as we were hoping for, and we've been building our intellectual property, waiting for the big prize at the end, which is Transnet.
Talking about the rail side of the business, how are you managing the rolling stock demand? Do you have enough rolling stock? Because as the rest of this is not just waiting for South Africa to open. You've already got open access in a number of countries in Africa, so the pie is far bigger than one imagines straight off the bat. So how are you managing that process? Are you investing?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Look, we're not a large business. We have a little bit of financial backing, but finance is always the most important aspect. I think rail is a capital-intensive business, as we all know. It's not a tech-type business where you've got huge returns very quickly. It takes you 5 years amortizing, sometimes 10 years amortizing some rolling stock, etc. We've tried to be as innovative as possible. So we have our own rolling stock. When we bought the business, there was some rolling stock already existing, albeit it needed some investing to sort of extend its lifespan. But yeah, rolling stock is certainly one of our biggest constraints at the moment. we've tried to be as innovative as we can to increase capacity quickly without having 24-month lag and lead time on trying to build out the capacity. So, for example, we've gone for a lot of B fleet capacity that sits idle. Unfortunately, with the reduction in volume on rail and the increase in volume on trucking because of myriad issues, what ends up happening is, a lot of rolling stock then, the rail authorities don't have the financial capacity to maintain it, and then it becomes cannibalized while you maintain some of the fleet. So a lot of that rolling stock has been sitting there. It's huge capital that's basically dormant. So we've gone with rail authorities. We've entered into triple P agreements, for example, with NRZ, with Botswana Rail, where we basically finance the refurbishment of that rolling stock, which is, then instead of waiting for 6 months to build a wagon or 3 months to build a wagon, you can do it in 1 month because, the wagon is there. It just requires some, in some cases, just a little bit of a touch-up. In other cases, you need some new parts, equipment, etc. But in any case, the lead time goes from, let's say, 3 months to 1 month. The cost is obviously significantly lower. And then we recover that investment via basically, a small discount on the rolling stock. So from terms of wagons, that's what we've done. In terms of locomotives, we've done a similar approach as well with some sort of B fleet locomotives that have been idling because, the capacity wasn't, the financial capacity, let's say, wasn't there. And then obviously we're leasing locomotives from some of the players in the market. And, we're happy to work in a partnership on that arrangement. I think we're very good at being able to book freight, being able to get freight onto rail from road by understanding the full supply chain, dynamic from shipping, whether it's, product going all the way to China. We understand the port costs, we understand the first mile, last mile costs, etc. And I think that helps us win a lot of business. And then we can take that business and we can partner with companies that may have the rolling stock but not the expertise in booking that freight. We're planning to raise significant capital to be able to grow out our fleet, especially for South Africa. Obviously, that's going to require huge amounts of rolling stock capacity.
How do you manage the relationships with multiple operators when you're working on a line? I mean, that must be quite challenging.
Yeah.
Different types of operations and how they operate. We talk about standardization and harmonization. Yes. Like, how do you get that right?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure we get it right all the time, but we certainly try. I think that's part of the challenge, and quite often we have to remind ourselves that that's the reason we have a job. That's the reason we have a business, is because it is difficult, and as such, as I mentioned earlier, you have to give a customer a seamless operation in the same way that they can get a seamless operation from an A to Z supplier like a trucking business. So for us to be able to do that, it means that we have to fix a lot of these problems. And I think a lot of customers, when we first started this business, what we were seeing was a lot of customers were saying, "Oh, rail never works. It's a complete nightmare." And then they give us, a litany of examples of disasters that they had to deal with the rail operators. Not because the rail operators were not performing, but simply because the rail operators, I think, were not designed for some of the sort of turnkey solutions that the customers were then looking for. So that's where the challenge for us was, but also the opportunity was. And I think because of that, we managed to find ways of solving. Obviously, one of the key components for us is having boots on the ground. That's super important. We have boots on the ground everywhere we operate. We never do anything by remote control. Everything is within our control. We've been very fortunate in that we've managed to recruit some fantastic talent that has deep relationships with a lot of the rail authorities that we work with. So that allows us to, ensure that what's happening on the ground is exactly what is the reality, and then respond to that in the correct manner. But yeah, it's a challenge. It's a big challenge, and I think it won't be resolved anytime soon. And that's where the opportunity is for us, certainly, because from a customer perspective, they're not interested in, this locomotive is out of action, and that one, and then when the wagons arrived at the border, this locomotive wasn't ready, whatever. They just want, look, what's your transit time? 3 days. Okay, I need to make it work in 3 days. So then we can coordinate it, and obviously, by us injecting some of our own rolling stock capacity, etc., it allows us to then prioritize our customers' flows, ensure that we know that the wagons are cleared. We also push a lot of the paperwork stuff that, that's not our responsibility, nor is it the responsibility of the rail authorities, but it's certainly something that can really hamper the turnaround times. And ultimately, slower turnaround times means less capacity. It's simple as that. So we're trying to squeeze every last inch from our capacity that we have So we make sure that the clearance is, even if it's not our responsibility, we still make sure it's pushed along. We make sure that all the documentation, etc. We have very, very clear timelines that we need to match. When wagons arrive at certain borders, we have to make sure that the locomotive is there to pick them up, and then the empties come down as quickly as possible. All those types of challenges.
What ARC is going to look like in the next 12 months?
Oh, that's a very good question. In the next 12 months, I think we will be rolling out more capacity. That's certainly true. So, we've got something like 150 wagons to refurbish that we're currently doing between Zimbabwe and Botswana. That's going to certainly be, within the next 12 months, a significant portion of that will be done. I think starting operations in South Africa, it's one of those things that, we've done some business in South Africa as purely as a customer, let's say, to Transnet. We haven't had the best experience, but we're certain that, we're working with Transnet closely now and trying to develop also capacity, our own capacity, etc., in the same way that we've done with all the other countries. So certainly some operations in South Africa. And then, further afield, I think, there's a lot of capital. I mean, in the SARA conference, we've heard a lot about the capital that's available from the likes of DBSA, etc. We'd certainly like to have those types of discussions as well. We think we are capable of putting down some very bankable offtakes that will allow those types of deals to come across. Obviously, getting the capital and then getting the rolling stock moving is a longer than 12-month process, but at least we'd like to think that in the next 12 months, so we'd have those deals signed so that we can start putting pen to paper on some of the rolling stock that we'd like to invest in.